Hi, Mick McQuaid here. I'd like to talk to you about the exam in iste432 database application development. This is the second exam, and a lot of it's going to be about the Macomber cube, so you'd better be ready for that. I'm going to share a couple of things in this video that I did not talk about in class that I need you to investigate. So it's very good that you're watching this video. Okay, so the first question that I want to ask you is, how do you provide access to data in a dynamic environment? So keep in mind that, a dynamic organization, not a dynamic environment, a dynamic organization. So how do you provide access in a dynamic organization? That means the organization is changing and you have to be able to keep up with it. As I mentioned, you have to be able to describe the Macomber cube. You should be able to identify all the elements of the Macomber cube. You should be able to describe the categories that all those elements fall into. So there are three categories, and within each of those three categories there are three elements that can be combined in obviously 27 different ways. Okay, now I want to ask you several questions about the Macomber cube that are specific to situations where I want you to identify the categories and elements of the Macomber cube that are in play in these. So, and let me give you an example of this. So suppose that on campus, on college campus, a firewall has been proposed to protect the research campus from international hackers who are seeking research secrets. But critics rebut that the FBI believes that some of the international hackers have registered as students and are actually already on campus. So what aspects of the Macomber cube are in play in this anecdote? Here's another one. An adversary sounds a fire alarm and gains access to the building and eventually to the server room in the ensuing confusion by exhibiting different characteristics upon meeting different kinds of exiting staffers in different locations. And which aspect of the Macomber cube has been publicly identified by a famous hacker named Kevin Mitnick as his preferred attack vector, and why does he say that? How can you make it easier for generalist managers, so this is not a Macomber cube one, how can you make it easier for generalist managers to identify sensitive resources to protect in an organization? Here's another Macomber cube anecdote. So which aspects of the Macomber cube are in play in this anecdote? So hackers claim to have inserted fake trades into the New York Stock Exchange, making the currently listed prices unreliable. Here's another one. Campusing, and this is a true one from a university I worked at previously. A campus imaging database contains all the documents of a researcher who passed away suddenly. The documents include a study of drug-addicted war veterans who later committed violent crimes. The documents include various medical and legal details about the veterans, about the victims of the crimes, and about government investigations of malfeasance. No one currently employed at the university knows anything at all about the study except a database specialist who accidentally discovered the material while trying to determine how to handle licensing of imaging software. So this is document imaging software that is used when the researcher passed away. His secretary actually just imaged all of his documents and put them into this campus-wide system for document imaging because the secretary didn't know what else to do with the documents. The documents were placed there, the secretary retired, nobody is left who knows anything about these documents except this database specialist who happened upon them and could tell from looking at them what they were all about. So let me find another one here. Okay, identify the smallest possible matrix for identifying privileges for people and database objects. if you wanted to specify a row and column setup for people to identify privileges for a database, objects, what would that be? What would be the dimensions of that matrix? So give at least 3 different reasons why you would uncouple people from data in making access decisions. Identify and describe 3 ethical principles for conducting research about access control on humans. So this comes from the 56-bit study that we discussed in class, where the people who conducted the study verified how they dealt with 3 important ethical principles. So what are those ethical principles, and describe them. Describe 3-factor authentication and include at least one barrier to its acceptance by users. So that's a 2-part question. So if I ask you that question, you need to answer both parts of the question. Often when I ask 2-part questions, I get an answer to 1 part. Big problem. How can you classify adversaries? And when I say classify adversaries, I mean the same thing as categorizing adversaries. I don't mean distinguishing adversaries from non-adversaries. I'm talking about classifying different kinds of adversaries, categorizing different kinds of adversaries. Okay, now here are some things that I didn't talk about in class that I want you to look up. So one is the PCI DSS requirements. I've put some information about that on my courses, but you can actually Google PCI, the letters PCI DSS, and there are some requirements. This is the PCI stands for the payment card industry, and there are some requirements that include requirement 6, which lists 7 ways to develop and maintain secure applications. So that's secure applications that employ credit card numbers. So what are some of these 7 ways? So the requirement number is requirement 6, but it lists 7 ways to make secure applications. So what are they? What kinds of permissions can you give to users of sensitive data? What are the possible types of permissions that can be given to users of sensitive data? What is cryptographic salt? And how does salt differ from the 56-bit secret in the study known by that name? So we talked about the 56-bit secret study in which people were given a secret that they had to learn, that they had to memorize. How is that different from salt? There is a famous October 2016 DYN attack, just the letters DYN, you can Google that. In that attack, what was the role of passwords in that attack? Just Google that and tell me what that is. I mean, you're obviously not going to Google it during the exam, I mean in preparing for the exam. And then I also want you to describe as many of the OWASP top 10 as you can. So OWASP publishes a list of the top 10 areas that people need to know about in security, that developers need to know about in security, the top 10 vulnerabilities. And so I want you to Google that. OWASP is just OWASP, and look at the top 10 and try to learn as many of those as you can. That's extremely valuable for you in meeting all kinds of regulatory requirements. The OWASP top 10 fits in with a lot of regulatory requirements about security. And the last question that I'm going to ask you about here is the notion of a zero-day vulnerability. Explain what that is. What is a zero-day vulnerability? What does that term mean? So that's it. Those are 20 questions, I think, that could well appear on the exam, or questions very much like them could well appear on the exam. I urge you to take a look at the study guide and find out all that you can about those questions. And then also Google the things that I mentioned that are not in the study guide, that I did not go over in class: cryptographic salt, the OWASP Top 10, and PCI DSS. That's pretty much all of those. Oh, and the October 2016 DYN attack, the role of passwords in that attack. So check into those things, and you should do well on the exam. Good luck with it, and thank you for your attention.